Okay, so here's a live streaming session that probably won't be very long, but I thought I'd just dive in and do a few odds and ends here. So let's go here and look at I basically whipped a quick and dirty edit together in Blender. I'm pretty sure I'm going to wind up back in Vegas for the real editing, but for now, you can get a flavor for what's going down in the show so far. Okay, so this is the storyboard or animatic, or whatever you want to call it, for the shot I'm currently working on. So the other day I said, I kind of feel like I'm going to wind up back in Tahoma 2D, and to be honest, guys, it didn't take very long for me to kind of change my mind. And I hadn't really been doing a bunch of ink and paint in Blender recently, and I kind of had to reacclimate to my hotkeys and blah blah blah. And once I returned to Blender and sort of got my brush dialed in, if you could believe that, it's really that simple. It helped a lot, and so yeah, I'm back in Blender. Anyway, there it is. So here's the shot that's currently in process. I basically redid the ink and paint that I had done in Tahoma and brought it back into Blender. Pretty confident the final results are going to be better doing it this way. So that's what we're going to do. So on the to-do list is basically the Lek bar fills and the shadows on this particular shot. So what I would say, if you're a fledgling animator, you want a little advice. The advice is this. If you're, this is really, it's nuance here, but here's the thing. I've learned this too many times in different ways to ignore it, which is this. If you have a shot, like here we've got one character in the shot. When you have a shot like this one, or like this one, where you have two characters that are stacked over top of one another in 3D space, you generally are going to thank yourself later if you put the fill operations for each of the individual characters on its own layer. Sounds like a really nuanced little dinky thing that probably doesn't make that much of a difference, but here's the problem. Here's what you run into. What you run into is a situation where the fill operations for all of these characters are pretty static. They don't really change much. We do have the shoulder shrug, but you could do that with the sculpting tool after the filling operations are done, right? You know, I didn't in this case. I did actually do fills on each of these individual frames, but I really wouldn't have had to. But the problem you run into is you wind up with one thing that sustains over a long period of time on your timeline. And so then when something in the individual character changes, like Jehoiakim here has a little bit of a change of expression right here. Okay, so for him, there's basically two frames. The problem is, in that same space of time, this guy has only one. And so what you wind up having to do is, because this character changed something, you have to go ahead and redo the fills on this character because all the fills are in one layer. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So you want to kind of think from the bottom up in terms of what's the stuff that doesn't move very much, where I'm only going to have one or two keyframes, and then the stuff that happens over top of it that modulates that in some way. It's just, you're always going to be better off to put it in its own layer. It's similar to the situation I had some time ago where I was using vertex colors to create palettes, and it just really backfired. And what it turned out to work a lot better is go ahead and give every single color its own material. But then I needed to get creative with the Blender materials stack. How do I organize it? How do I keep organized so I know what I'm doing and how to find the color I'm looking for, so I'm not like constantly searching? And the answer was to put in basically dummy materials so that I can put labels in appropriately. Then it's easy. Then I just scan to the character and there's all their colors. Now, having said that, this, to be honest, This shot happens to be an exception to that because I've been stealing materials from other characters to do this, because this is two guys that pretty much are never going to appear again in the show other than in this shot. So I gave myself the liberty of just snagging a material here and there to kind of make it work. So, getting back to the original point, the problem I have right now is that Lekbar and Jehoiakim do have their ink on their own layers, but not their color. So the fills, a lot of the fills, not all, but a lot of the fills are on this fills layer, and I'm kind of regretting that now. For stupid reasons. Like another practical reason, just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, is you do a fill operation on the face, and it fills in the skin, but because there's a little leak here, it also filled in his eyebrows. And also, I could not possibly have avoided the fact that there's a leak into his mustache, because they're not closed shapes, right? So, what do we do? What do we do? Well, what we do is, let's create a new layer, and we will call this the Lekbar fills. And then we need to do a little bit of quick surgery here to fix the problem. Lekbar fills. Okay, it just made a keyframe for me. I really didn't want a keyframe. Wait, yeah, okay, cool. Apparently, until there's a keyframe, it will not show up over here, so that's something to be aware of. So what do we do? Well, let's go back here to where this whole sequence starts. And what we'll do is we will turn off Lekbar's ink layer. Why are we doing that? Well, because I'm going to jump into edit mode, and I'm just going to lasso all of this. Sorry, need to be in this layer. Lasso this, hit L, which is select linked. It's going to select all of the vertices that are linked to the strokes that I just selected. And then I'm going to hit the M key and move these fills into the Lekbar fills layer. Okay? So now, that layer does in fact have a keyframe. And so as you can see, we're going to have to do a few of these. So it's a bit of a pain, but okay, hold on a second here. Here we go. So then this bit, okay, this looks confusing. So I better clarify. Right now this looks confusing because the layer I just created with his fills are in fact still on the screen. However, just be aware, I've got Blender set most of the time. Very rarely do I switch this up, but sometimes I do. Auto lock inactive layers. That means that whatever layer I select, I cannot accidentally grab something from a different layer. Okay? So, what I do then is what I did before. All I'm doing is just going through and taking this guy's ink and moving it into this layer. So now, for now, so I get better clarity on what I'm doing, I'm going to actually turn the Lekbar fills layer off. Because now I can see exactly what I want to grab and move. Okay, so I can move these to the Lekbar fills. Get it? Now, I just want to say, the fact that you can even do this at all so quickly and easily in Blender is pretty cool. So I'm in the fills layer, but I'm moving everything frame by frame to the other layer. And then at that point, basically, the situation is quite a bit cleaner. And then these frames also repeat over here. So again, let's move it to here. Yes, it's a pain. Yes, it takes a little time, but my own fault because I kind of broke one of my own rules and put the fills for all the characters on the same layer, more or less, and then sure enough, as usual, lived to regret it. Okay, so that all works. We do have a stray bit of fill here. I don't know what that is. It's probably something that was underneath the other colors, and So I'm going to turn this off, and that did not turn it off. So that means that that little artifact is somewhere else. What layer is it in? This is one thing I wish Blender had that. I'm just going to start turning layers off. Again, it's the 80-20 rule. Like, this is going to take longer than anything. Major pain. Just because I can't figure out what layer it's in. So one thing you do have with OpenToons or Tahoma 2D is you can click on the color and it'll automatically go to that color in the palette, which is quite useful. So is it this layer? Yeah, I see what I did. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. Ah, there it is. It's in the Jehoiakim fills layer. Oopsie poo, so that means it probably starts here. Yep, there's your problem. Grab that and delete it. That doesn't belong in there, friends. Did it reappear here? No. Did it reappear here? No. Okay, so we have a more complicated problem with Lechbar. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these all back on one by one, which I may regret. I may wind up turning them back off, but we'll see. Okay, so what's the problem, you say? Well, Lechbar Ink actually has his skin in that layer. So we need to get that back out too. How do we do it? Well, the only way I can think of to do it is go to your materials and turn the ink off. Just turn it off. Now, what we will do is, I want to avoid confusion here, so I'm going to take the fills layer, turn it off. Lechbar fills, turn that off. Okay, so what I want to do is actually grab this stuff here and actually put that in the Lechbar fills layer. Is this making sense? I hope it is. I do still see a couple little artifacts here that probably just need to be deleted. No, I'm not sure what that is, but we'll come back to it. Okay, so this, since the Lechbar fills layer is turned off, then this must be an artifact. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see it since the layer is turned off. So we'll just move that to there and just keep going along. Move it to the Lechbar. Okay, so this is all about what happens when you go wrong organizationally and you have to, you know, backtrack and I think I'll take a chance and stick that in the Lechbar fills layer. So I guess we'll probably have a bunch over here too. Yep. Excuse me. Let me move this and see what happens. Okay, yeah, it does move the strokes. So I tell you what, I'm going to finish doing this little bit of grunt work, and then, excuse me, I will then check and see if there's anything going on in the chat. Odds are nobody's even here. I don't, you know, I have no idea. Can't see it right now. Move to the Lechbar fills. Cool. And again, we do have one little, we got one little artifact there that I'm just going to delete. If I have to correct it on his fills by putting some color back in, that's fine. No big deal. I won't waste time explaining why that might have happened. Not really that relevant at the moment. Okay, everything looks pretty clean now. Okay, so we can turn this stuff back on, and now what we have is Lechbar ink. I'm turning it on, but I'm not seeing it. That would lead me to believe that I may have just introduced another problem that's weird. So I guess I will divert right now over to here. And, oh, yeah, like nobody's watching. So, well, that's been happening more lately. When I live stream in the evening, people kind of come around. And in the afternoon, they tend not to, which is understandable. Okay. Where did my Lechbar ink go? Yeah, and of course I need to put in keyframes to hide this color when it switches shots. It's one of the something I mentioned the other day in the live stream is be very cautious. Um, I'm thinking and talking at the same time, and that doesn't work very well. So I'll just forget what I was about to say. It doesn't matter. But what is strange here is that I'm not seeing the sketch list. Oh, I know what it is. I'm sorry. I made a brutal mistake. I forgot to turn this material back on. I knew it was something simple. I'm like, okay, this is a little mysterious. Okay, so now we got Lekbar in his own layer, and so now what we can do is go to his ink layer or fill layer, and what I'll do is I'm just gonna pack these together. I'm gonna go ahead and put these, like, stack them. And now what we can do is give him his mustache and eyebrows back. So, what color do we use for his? It seems to me I use the Tia skin color. Here's hoping. Okay, this is okay, and again, I'm cheating a bit. What we're going for is this color right here. Obviously, it's too light, but that's okay because TNR is not in this shot, so I can go ahead and steal her color for this. Normally, I would not do this sort of thing because it's an organizational catastrophe. But in this case, like I said, I know that these guys are never going to be in any other shots in the show. And if they were, you would not remember them. So for that reason, it's no big deal to just kind of cheat and use the materials. Okay, so now we're into a little bit another interesting aspect of this. This is a good example of why doing the shoulder shrug, which is basically him laughing or chuckling. See that? This is where it would be smarter, in this case, again, organizationally, planning ahead. You would first do the ink and paint, and then add this secondary animation afterwards. Because now what I have to do, it's not a big deal, but I do have to do it, is I have to duplicate this color in all of these other frames. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier. If you plan ahead, you can kind of think in terms of layers, and you'd say, well, this color sustains over the whole sequence, with the exception of the shoulder shrug or the chuckle. So what you would do is you get all the color in, and then actually add the sculpting to make the shoulders go up and down after the fact. That would be the last thing you do, and you would do it on both the ink and color layers at the same time. Is this making sense? You'd think, like, okay, that can't possibly be a big deal, and you'd be amazed how much time you wind up wasting because of a little mistake like that. Okay, so the way I'm going to solve this for the moment is this way. I'm going to turn the ink back off again. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is go to the Lechbar Fills layer, go into edit mode, click on this, click on this. Gosh, looks like I got quite a bit of clicking to do. What I'll do here is, let me make sure I'm on the correct frame. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit L for select link, and I'm going to hit the G key to wiggle this around to see if I got it all, which I did. Okay, so now shift click here, L. Okay, now what I can do is go to the frame where something changed and undo that. What I just tried to do didn't work. So apparently I did not. I want to copy these, friends. Control V. There we go. Okay, so boom. boom, boom. But this is, to me, this is a good study. It's a cool thing to look at because it really illustrates how one organizational mistake can actually take quite a bit of time trying to clean up the mess. Definitely. So there's that. Did this work? Okay, let's find out. Okay, we don't want to be in edit mode because I don't want to see all the orange. So cool. We're good. Okay, so the only other caveat being Lekbar fills. What we want to do is right here, boom, is hit the I key and insert a blank keyframe to kill effectively all those fills so they don't continue to appear. So I think I started to say this a bit ago and then lost my train of thought. What I was going to say is this is why usually throughout the course of this show, I almost always do only one shot per file, if you will. So, and that's because in Krita, from a performance standpoint, you would only want to animate basically just this, and then just this, then just this, then just this. You see what I'm saying? You would break it up into individual shots because otherwise, in Krita, performance begins to tank noticeably pretty quick once you get beyond, you know, the length of a single shot, which is typically somewhere between 20 and 80 frames. Sometimes more, but, you know. You get the idea, friends. Okay, so now one question that is kind of somewhat begged is, should the shadows for everybody be on the same layer? In the normal case, you can do it. So let me just think about this for a minute. What I'm thinking about is there some reason why if I put the shadows all on their own layer, because of the cuts and because of the different characters that are overlapped, is that going to cause a problem? I think not. I think we're okay in this case. So let's go to the shadow filled material and just begin to rock and roll. We're going to draw the shadows manually. We're just going to do it the hard way, right? He usually has sort of shadows underneath his eyes, a little bit under the nose. As you can see, when I go outside the lines, it doesn't appear. So you say, wait, how is that possible? Well, that's done with masking. So what's happening is the shadow layer is masked according to the fills layer. And actually, that might be where the problem is going to occur. Yes. We should add the Lekbar fills and we should add the Jehoiakim fills to the masking. Now you might ask yourself, well, can that cause a problem too? Yeah, it definitely could. Well, let me think about this. No, the masking only occurs if in fact there's color there to mask it. So in other words, we do not have the risk of trying to draw a shadow that seems to be being masked for no apparent reason. Does this make sense? I hope it does. So let's just do what we do. Now, when you're doing a real show, this kind of stuff comes up kind of a lot. You learn these sort of workflow things that, you know, basically by making mistakes enough times that you learn your lesson. And I'm a slow learner. Okay, so now, hang on, stop. Okay, this is interesting. Yes, this was yet another exception to the rule whereby, because this hand was only on the screen very briefly, I just put the ink and the color in the same layer. So that means I have another problem, and the problem is that the Lekbar ink layer needs to be included in the masking. So I hope this is showing pretty explicitly some of the things that can go wrong if you're really disorganized. Just saying, friends. Okay, so I'm going to just have some fun now and go through and just, it's always fun to put in shadows, because shadows really punch up production quality kind of a lot, actually. And I can see a problem. It looks to me like Asher's beard forgot to be put in. So I could fix that immediately, which would probably be the best thing to do. So we go to the fills layer, and the material would be the whites of eyes, which is also used for Asher's beard. And this I have to basically paint by hand the hard way. Okay, let's see if that problem shows up anywhere else. We can ignore it there. Looks like it doesn't, so we're good. So we can go from here, go back to the shadow material, go back to the shadow layer, and we're back in business. Okay, so one thing I want to look at is, in terms of lighting, I'm kind of feeling like probably we want something like this. You know, you might even go ahead and let his nose be covered a bit. So every time I draw on a new frame, it's going ahead and creating new keyframes. If you didn't want that, and in many circumstances you don't, then this is your answer right here. If you click this, I'm sorry, wrong. This. Additive drawing means that when I start drawing into a new frame, it just adds to whatever was there before, as opposed to creating brand new keyframes. Get it? Okay, so let's kind of go for a bit of continuity here on the animated shadow. Maybe a little bit of a wrinkle there would be okay. And now we're just dealing with Asher. So we'll just kind of do it like this. You know, it is a dungeon after all. I mean, it's kind of a dark space that they're in, so I expect after I do the shadows, we'll be probably wrapping up this live stream because we got other things going on in the, you know, 3 to 4 o'clock period. Okay. Nice squash and stretch on this bit. It helps to bounce back and forth just to make sure I kind of preserve the continuity from one frame to the next. Boom. And, you know, there's more than one way to skin that cat, as they say. You could just draw a line, even in a dummy layer, and then do the shadows as a fill. What are you even talking about, Dave? In other words, you would just draw the lines like this on another layer and then hit the shadow material and just do a fill, you know. You know how it works. I'm sure you do. We don't have to be too persnickety here because everything is crazily in motion. And when everything's moving fast, you can get away with more in terms of the details, because the eye does not have time to digest what it's seeing, as I think as I know I've said here before. So one of the cool things about animation, theoretically, the harder the animation is, in other words, the more things move, the less careful you have to be about making it look perfect. I think, I'll get into some opinion here. You know, to me, the great mistake that comes out in, say, Disney animation, The Illusion of Life. You know, what the Disney animators learned, they learned a lot of really neat things about drawing and animation. But I do not believe. Okay, so now here, okay, let's approach this a little differently. Here, what we're going to do is what I said earlier. I'm going to take this frame and duplicate it to here because I don't really want all this other stuff to chatter and jump around. Okay, so now I'll just erase these bits here, but leave the others, and that way we get continuity from one frame to the next. So it's my contention. You know, you look at who's really made the money, who's really been the popular one over the last, you know, decades and decades. It's The Simpsons. It's, you know, Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's you know, anything from Seth MacFarlane. In other words, it's the story and the comedy and the fun that carries the day, not the movement. In other words, I firmly believe this, is that the actual animation is by far the least important thing. By far. Okay, this is probably a duplicate. So let me say, take these two frames. I'm going to take a little chance here and say, duplicate this and just move them to there and see if that works. Pretty much, although this one's off a little bit, so we'll just go ahead and sculpt that into shape. This is right here is where Blender really shines. The ability to do secondary animation or tweak things very quickly with sculpting is just the bomb. Very cool. Okay, and then here he just moved a little bit, so we'll just do that, you know, just accommodate that little move. Here, probably don't need to change anything, but just for kicks and giggles I will. And now we're at these guys. Okay, so back to the draw mode. And just for the record, I may put in a secondary shadow layer that just basically puts a big, you know, it just puts these guys a little bit more in darkness because, again, they are in a dungeon after all. But we'll see. I'm not sure that I'm going to do that. I probably will, though, because more often than not, it turns out to be the right thing to do. Okay, so we'll just kind of do this. And again, as kind of alluded to before, because these guys are overlapped, there is going to be, okay, I've got a problem. Something just went wrong where Blender quit responding, so I'm going to save my work. What just happened here? Oh. Okay, yes. So Jehoiakim Inc. His color is not in the fills layer either. Where the heck did I put his fills? Oh, down here. Okay, my bad. So let's pop this up here, and then let's go to the shadows layer, and we want to add the Jehoiakim fills to the masking. There you go. There you go. Otherwise, we ain't gonna see it. I'll check the chat here in a minute, but basically, if there's questions about how masking works or something, just spit it out, and I'll do my best to address the questions. You know, he says to nobody at all, because I'm pretty sure nobody's watching. Oh, we got 2 watching. Hey, Maria. Working from home today. Nice. Nice. Okay, so now... okay, so... Well, there you can see it. So here what I really have to do, and I'm gonna take hit the F key and shrink the influence here down quite a bit. Because what I want to do is, I just want to make these very subtle fixes here. Everything's moving quick, as noted, so this does not have to be perfect. It's going to be And by the way, let me jump to here. Yeah, so I think what I can do, another great example of sort of organization. If this looks good and this looks good, or I'm sorry, this looks good, then why not just duplicate it? Get it looking right one time, and then you can polish it a bit. Okay. Can I live with this little problem? I don't think so. So I'm going to actually shrink this down even more. By the way, in Blender, if I don't want to shrink it, I could actually just zoom in because the size of the influence does not scale with zooming the screen. Not at all. And we definitely have some little glitchy bit there because, well, I won't waste your time explaining why, but okay, and now we want to say, where is the other? We'll come back to that frame, but I think this is what we're looking for. Yes, this right here. We want to take this and duplicate this to here, and then we want to go there and sculpt Jehoiakim. So I'm going to hit the F key and make that bigger again so that I can just take this part. And why am I in the sketch layer? How did I get switched to the sketch layer? Blender, what did you do? There we go. Okay, and then see, this is exactly what I was talking about. So you see what just happened here? The problem is that we've got these duplicate shadows from back here, but what we forgot is that Jehoiakim's position changes. That means that this doesn't quite work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat. What I'm going to do is grab these shadows, delete those strokes, come back here where I know they're correct, grab these, Control C, and then Control V, Control That's a bummer. Well, like I said, if you're gonna put the characters on separate, what am I trying to say? Combining stuff all in one layer is fine if they don't overlap. Basically, that's not completely true, but it's close. If they overlap, man, you're asking for trouble. So you can see the shadows, boop, right there. They wiggled a little bit. That's not going to matter. You're not going to notice that in the show. So can we maybe fix it this way again? Let's find out. I think that, just for the record, the reason that last cut and paste did not work was because I didn't hit the L to select linked, because I was kind of thinking about what happened when I moved stuff from one layer to another. Gist of it being the following. If you grab a stroke, if you just grab a few vertices of a stroke and move it to another layer, the entire stroke will be moved to another layer. However, if you grab a bunch of vertices and cut and paste them, only the vertices you grabbed will transfer. So that means what I have to do here is go grab this bit, delete it all, and then hit Control V to paste in the strokes that I just copied, and then I will go in and just clean up this little bit with sculpting afterwards. Same thing here. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, every possible problem you can have that relates to okay, let's learn from our mistake. Here's how we'll do it, at least a little bit. What I'll say is, I'll go back here. I didn't mean to hit extrude. Sorry, guys. You got to hit D for... okay, stop everything. Undo twice. Undo. Okay. Hit the D key to go into draw mode, then into sculpt mode. It's a little weird, but you can't go directly from sculpt mode. To sculpt mode from edit mode, for the simple reason that they have a hotkey in common. Okay, So now we can grab all of this and paste it here. So in other words, I did the fix before going to the next frame because I knew I was going to repeat that fix here. Hope this is making sense, friends. Okay, so there's that, and now we're back to Asher. And we will... I'm not actually sure how to interpret that. It's showing me the selection of a bunch of vertices that don't actually exist on this frame. Probably solved by simply creating a new keyframe. Yeah. Okay, so here's Asher. Good old Asher. Thanks for your compliment on Discord. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I thought it was looking... I mean, compared to, you know, back in the day when you were first dipping your toes into the pool of animation, I totally see improvement. Like, a lot. Definitely. I think that what you're doing, you know, it feels pretty good. So, take that for what it's worth. For what it's worth, my dear. I think the main thing for you, actually, I'll show you. I'm going to jump to Krita and actually deal with this right now. I'm going to show you something. Here's the main thing for you. If you're an animator, okay, animators like to make things move, okay? This can be a bit of a problem. So we want to have this move, and we want to have it move, let's say, to here. Okay, stop everything. Stop everything. Change this to auto key blank. Okay, so we're going to have it move. Stop everything. Delete everything. Blah, 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 blah. Why am I doing that? I'm stopping everything because Krita by default puts in a background layer that you cannot animate keyframes on, which is like the stupidest thing ever. So we don't want to turn this into a Krita rant, but you need to actually create a new layer so that you can get busy. Okay, so what I was going to say is, per what Maria was doing, we're going to animate the ball from here to here. And then this is key. Later, we're going to animate the ball from here to here. Okay. So what you're going to be tempted to do, let's turn on the onion skins so we can see what we're doing. If you're gonna tween this, I mean, you might say I'm complicating this by introducing the idea of easing. Let's not do that for the moment. So what you're going to be tempted to do is go to the frame that's in between the two, put in a tween. Just let's do that again. Okay. And then what you might do is let's just split the difference. I know these aren't like an even number of frames, so it's not perfect, but we'll just run with it this way for purposes of illustration. Okay? Okay. So now the whole animation is 12 frames long. And let's set the frame rate to 8. Okay, so now here's the thing you're going to deal with. Everything's moving at the same pace. Okay? Now, the people that there's plenty of people on YouTube that are going to tell you, well, you need to think about tweening. And they're not wrong, okay? Because if you space these out more or less evenly, you know, relative to each other, then it's not going to move at a steady pace. But that's not the point I'm here to make right now. Okay, so we'll do that. So the way I just did that actually automatically puts in some easing. But one thing I've noticed from long, long ago when I started with animation is two things. Number one, animators always want to keep things moving all the time. Worst possible thing you can do. Secondly, animators always have stuff happen way faster than it really should. Okay, so if you take the first lesson and apply it, we're not going to get into having the ball squash and stretch. You already know all that. Okay, if we go from here to here, I'm going to go shift and just move this forward. Okay, so now I've made it better. How? By introducing a pause. Obviously, it doesn't make sense. This is not a bouncing ball. This is just a thing that's moving, right? Could be someone's head, could be the joint of someone's elbow, it could be anything. It doesn't matter. The point is that you will always be tempted to have this not take as long as it should. Your temptation will always be to do this. If you believe that the magic is in the animation, then you're going to do this. And what you've just done is you've created a situation where the main keyframe here is this one. This is the one where everything stops moving. This is the one where the audience has a chance to see what's really there on the screen, because up until then, everything's moving. You don't have time to think about that. Okay? So this is the magic frame. This is the one that you need to make sure looks good. Back here, as I always say, you can get away with murder. You could use Liquify to stretch this. You could do all kinds of things, and it will all work. The motion will work. But then what you're going to do is you're just going to keep it moving. And you will rob your audience of the delight of seeing this key moment, which is a really important moment. When in doubt, make the pauses much longer than you think. Poof. Poof. So I used to talk about, in the earlier days here on YouTube, I used to talk about hold and snap. The idea being that, and I used to deal with this with live action actors. I would have to tell them, look, in your scene, you've got a little sequence here where you have about 12 things in a row that happen. You turn to the camera or to the other person, you say your line of dialogue, you look down and you kind of think about what you're about to say next because you're about to tell them something they don't want to hear, and then you look up at them and you say your line. Okay, so there's 5 things. I will guarantee you that the novice actor will just do all those 5 things. And I'm like, dude, you just threw away the whole performance. Don't do that. Do the turn of the head and give it a minute for the audience to go, wow, you know, he's thinking. And then when you turn back to the person, snap, because this is an important thing that you want to say. So boom, you just snap back. And then you wait, snap back. Now the audience is going, oh my God, what's he going to do? And then say the line. So this matter of pacing is so important. It's like freaking wait. Let it take as long as it wants to take. And until that animation, from a pacing standpoint, truly, viscerally, to you, feels good, then I guarantee you it's not there yet. You haven't gotten to where you're trying to get to. Guaranteed. Every time. I know that sounds like totally arrogant and stuff, but I mean, I've just been around this block 800 trillion times. Okay. So there you go. That's a tip for you. Because the animations that I saw, the animation is good, but everything's moving all the time, and so there's no story being told. Let me put it that way. I've never thought about this before. I've never said it this way before. If everything never stops moving, there is no story other than the story that, oh, stuff's moving. That's the only story being told. Because there's no chance for the audience to digest the story within that animation. And the only way you achieve that is freaking stop moving for half a second. Usually, literally, by the way, it is about a half a second. Somewhere between a half a second and 2 seconds. Give it a pause. Give it a breather, because human beings actually do have to breathe, do have to gather their thoughts, do have to think about the fact that they're about to say something the other person probably doesn't want to hear, and I don't quite know how to say it. I'm a little nervous, right? Those are all pauses, you know, and that snap that happens so that, in other words, you could take emotion and spread emotion. Let's say the motion takes 5 seconds, okay? But your animation only has, you know, a limited number of frames. So what you have is 5 seconds of stuff constantly moving. In almost every scenario, I'll guarantee you, almost every scenario, if you took that motion, split it in half, and take each half and crunch the keyframes closer together so that you have a snappy motion followed by a pause and then another snappy motion, almost 100% of the time, you will have a better storytelling animation. So there you go, Maria. That's your tip of the day. Take it or leave it. And I think your tutor will probably agree that, man, you know, Maria, your animation, it's coming to life. It's popping. a little more. It's got a little more snap to it. What'd you do different? Oh, I just decided what the important things were in the story I was trying to tell, and I allowed the audience to digest those things, and then I moved a little quicker from thing to thing. You'll be a kick-ass animator here before too long if you apply some of these ideas. All right, let's get back to work. What time is it? 3:06. Okay, so yeah, he's got a big break here. That's so helpful. I think that's what Ferdinand may have meant by samey. Yes, probably is. Probably is, because your stuff's moving. It's totally moving, but samey means there's a uniformity of movement that quite literally never happens in real life, ever. You know, you like cats. Well, look at a cat. When does a cat ever move continuously? Even when they're stalking prey, their whole body moves in a very controlled, fluid way because they're being careful, which, of course, in the real world is not the normal case. The normal case isn't people being careful, like a cat stalking, but stalking is kind of an exception to the rule in that you've got these very steady, careful movements that are very smooth. Well, that's because he's stalking. That's because he wants to kill something, right? And so you say, okay, so there's that, but then what does the cat do? It freezes. And how long is the freeze compared to the stalking movement? 10x? Yeah, it's probably 10 times as long. Hey, Chiziapo. Probably 10 times as long waiting before he starts stalking again. And then when he springs, what happens? He's really moving fast. You don't have too many keyframes, friend, because he's got to move 20 feet in literally a quarter of a second. So it is kind of commonsensical. And the thing I say to any fledgling animator is allow yourself this. Allow yourself to do. Don't be seduced by this idea that the magic is in the animation. That is absolute bullshit. That is so wrong. The magic is not in the animation. It's in the storytelling that's connected piece by piece by animation. So in other words, the animation is effectively a side effect of the story that you're trying to tell. It's kind of a necessary evil. You could think of it that way. Honestly, I got to tell you, that tip alone, in the world of people that would come to this channel, that tip alone will probably improve people's animation more than any other single thing. And the amazing thing about it is, what they wind up doing is less work, but a better result. Crazy, huh? Crazy. No, I've gotten a lot of mileage in this show, and I think it's where a lot of the entertainment value comes from, is knowing when to, and I guess you see this a lot on, like Family Guy or, Parks and Rec or The Office, any of these shows where they really get a lot of mileage out of the awkward moment. Well, what is the awkward moment? It's freezing. It's stopping moving, That's what the awkward moment is. And they get so much comedic value out of knowing when to do nothing and let the audience tell the story to themselves, I think that's super cool stuff. All right, let's keep going here. Okay, Asher, what are we going to do? Well, we should go into sculpt mode, keep it very broad. Yep, that would be, to me, my number one. To the person that's learned how to make things move, the very next thing I'd teach them is, okay, now know when to stop having them move. And you will thank yourself a million times over. But the problem is we don't trust that. Because we don't trust our ability as storytellers, we don't take the risk of allowing it to just sit there on the screen. Because it's scary, basically. I think that's true. I mean, if you guys disagree with my perspective on that, yeah, feel free to disagree. It's cool. Okay, so now he's got to jump down. So I'm using sculpting because there's enough things in these frames that don't change that I don't want to introduce chatter, unnecessary or undesired chatter in the you know, in the animation. Whoops. Okay, so now I need to zoom way in so I can grab this. Obviously, I need to color his eyebrows. But actually, I do believe maybe I'm done with the shadows. So can you imagine what a nightmare this would be if during Asher's little, I mean, this is a fairly long monologue. Now to put this in perspective for you, let me tell you something. This actually speaks to what I'm talking about today in terms of pacing and timing and all of that. If you look at the script, okay, Asher says, let me show you what Asher says. I've got to, unfortunately, I guess I need to switch to my other browser window. Okay, this is literally only 3 lines of dialogue, and it's properly formatted screenplay dialogue, which means that's it. This is everything Asher says. It's very short.
That's very kind, Joachim. Your mother would be pleased. But Lekbar has a job to do, and I apparently am a danger to the throne.
Okay, so that's what Asher says. If all of that dialogue, if the characterizations and stuff were not, I'm making a little fix here, we're not on separate layers, then you would have to match these shadows for every single time his mouth moves. Can you imagine? That's insane. You don't want to do that. So let's see if I can nail this.
That's very kind, Joachim. Your mother would be pleased. But Lekbar has a job to do, and I apparently am a threat to the throne.
So that's, I'm looking at the script, not the animation, so I don't know if I quite nailed it. But that's what has to happen there. So this part is a little problematic.
That's very kind, Jehoiakim.
It's got to be said pretty fast.
It's very kind, Jehoiakim. Your mother would be pleased.
And then I guess I ran those together. So ultimately, let me see here. Okay, I'm going to make a little command decision here. Because for the same reason I'm talking to Maria about, the fact of the matter is that this is a run-on sentence. This is kind of ugly, actually. It's not great storytelling. So I'm going to turn off auto-lock inactive layers so that all the layers are active. I can see what I've got on the screen here, right? So here's what we want to do. Okay, I think I have enough lip sync in there, but what I want to do is grab all this, and we'll just take the basic rule of, say, somewhere between a half a second and 1 second, okay? So at 8 frames per second, I've got somewhere between 4 and 8, so let's do 6. So I'm going to hit the G key, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? He says your mother would be pleased. Wait a minute. Got it wrong. Made a mistake. And grab this from here and go another 5 or 6.
That's very kind, Jehoiakim. Your mother would be pleased. But blah, 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 blah.
You see, this is like way the hell better. Like way better. So I'm really grateful here because I literally bumped into a perfect example of exactly what I've been talking about, and that was not planned. But there it is, right in front of you. If I didn't do what I'm doing right now. Okay, the thing I would maybe qualify this is I'd say maybe take the closed mouth and move it downstream a bit, and then take these 2 frames and duplicate them to just stretch that out a bit.
That's very kind, Jehoiakim. Your mother would be pleased.
Okay, except, again, I made the same mistake twice. These look so similar that I keep putting the correction in the wrong place. So forgive me for that. I'm just going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to let this breathe a bit. Let it stretch out.
That's very kind, Jehoiakim. Your mother would be pleased. But blah 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 blah.
And then he gives him a wink, which I love that. I mean, to me, that was a cool touch. See what I'm saying, friends? You see what I'm saying? Let it. This is what I actually literally when I was on the set dealing with live action, actors. This is what I would say, and at the end of a couple of the films, I remember, my cast would be ribbing me. They'd be like, "Let it breathe, let it breathe." They'd say to me, kind of mockingly, because I said it to them so many times. I'd be like, "Come on, let it breathe, let your performance breathe a bit." I'm gonna actually stretch this out more, so it just kind of feels better. All right.
That's very kind, Jehoiakim. Your mother would be pleased. But Lechbar has a job to do, and apparently I'm some sort of threat to the throne.
Dude, that is at least twice as good as what I had before I fixed it. And all because of letting it breathe. All because of putting spaces in. Isn't that crazy? I love it. All right, save that. I think that's it for me. Yeah, it's 3:15. Let me check and I'll see if there's any last minute questions. Okay. The idea of freezing makes me think of the direction note to Hardy when Laurel does it. Yes. Well, that's right. If you want to, that's a great point. If you want to really get a perfect study of what I'm talking about, you want to look at Charlie Chaplin. You want to look at Laurel and Hardy. Because those early silent film comedians, they understood. You have to. Well, what Chaplin said was this. I think it was Chaplin who said it. Maybe someone else said it based on Chaplin. But basically, the idea was signal to the audience what you're about to do it, and then let them know that you did it. Sometimes the letting them know you did it is that you stop moving and you allow that moment to just percolate, and then the laughter happens, right? But it takes a moment. People's brains kind of need to catch up to what they're seeing. So there's one thing about this that did still bug me a little bit.
That's very kind, Jehoiakim.
Yeah, right there. There's your problem. I'm going to actually tell you that I'm not happy with this quite yet. This bit needs to be stretched out a bit more. Okay, so these two keyframes were duplicates of the other. So what I'm going to do is delete them and then grab all four of these and duplicate that instead. And I suspect that's going to make it pop.
That's very kind, Jehoiakim. Your mother would be pleased.
Okay, and I don't like the fact that we went to the small mouth shape here either. I basically did the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this breathe even more. Take out these two. I know this is hard to follow. You'll have to trust me on this one. If this was your scene, you would know it well enough that you'd be able to do this too.
That's very kind, Jehoiakim. Your mother would be pleased.
Okay, and I don't like that little hiccup there at the end. Going to the closed shape. Let me look at that one more time.
Your mother would be pleased.
Yeah, there's a little. It's, I mean, that sort of closed mouth shape there kind of works, but this one definitely does not. So just let me correct this. Open, almost closed. This needs to be like probably wide open. Yeah, something like that. Yes, I think that's going to make it work. So let's pop that in there. And
your mother would be pleased. Your mother would be pleased.
Yeah, we'll go with that for the moment. I probably could be massaged even a little bit more, but what if we just extend this one frame, this last phoneme?
Your mother would be pleased. Your mother would be pleased.
Okay, I'll go with that for the moment. I kind of feel like I could beat it to death, but
Lechbar has a job to do. Apparently, I'm some sort of threat to the throne.
Okay, there we go. Definitely improved, all because of timing and pacing, not because of animation, not because of animation at all. 100% because of timing. So,
thank you, universe, for giving me a perfect example of the very thing I was ranting about.
Okay. So, let me see here. By the way, I wanted your thoughts on something. Okay, I'm happy to help. I was watching a video and someone said masculine stories are about becoming, while feminine stories about we are. What are your thoughts on it? especially on how you write stories and story direction. It made me think, but wanted other people's thoughts on it. Well, that's a tricky one because obviously the labeling of a story as being either masculine or feminine is very arbitrary, and it's a personal response to the story. So this is a basic danger in the human experience overall. It's why we get so polarized politically and stuff. In other words, if you in the current climate, for example, in the United States of America, if I say something that's critical of, let's say, Zionist Israel, then I'll be accused of being anti-Semitic. Well, the thing is that that's a label that's being placed on me that's not actually accurate to the situation. And this is something that's come up. Maybe it'll cause this video. Me just saying it might cause the video to get taken down. I doubt it, but I guess it's possible. So those labels are a little dangerous. Anytime you're adding, masculine, feminine, I mean, what do you really mean? So the first answer would be, what does masculine and feminine about a story mean to you? What does it mean to you? What do you think of when you think of a story that's masculine? When I think of a story that's masculine, I'm probably thinking of a more typical American story. And the becoming, if we're gonna restrict ourselves to that concept, because I think the judgment of masculine or feminine is way broader than just, you're talking about the nature of how the character gets from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. That's what you're saying. How do we connect the dots, right? So if it's a becoming story, what you're really saying is this character, kind of like Melchizedek, over the course of my story, Melchizedek will discover that he's got more in him than he realized. Okay, Tianara, on the other hand, it's the same story. It's not a masculine versus feminine story, but it is a masculine versus feminine character. Tianara, on the other hand, it could definitely be said that over the course of the story, what she begins to do more is trust herself to be who she really is. And for her, that means shedding the strictures and prejudices associated with her upbringing. Because she was brought up wealthy, best schools, good education, pretty worldly, a lot of traveling around. So it's not like the things she knows and thinks in her head are wrong, but they're from the perspective of somebody that had a fairly entitled upbringing. And that is who she is. And the truth is that perspective does have value. But when your perspective manifests as action of some kind in your life, something you say, something you do, that's when you bump into the other character who all of a sudden has a different opinion. The truth of the matter is that the most worldly character in our cast is Luca. Luca's the guy that's actually had to live on the street his whole freaking life and has to be very resourceful and clever and find a way to sort of get along with everybody. So who's becoming and who's discovering who they already were or whatever? The comment that you're bringing up probably has to do with the perspective of seeing a feminine story as being a more holistic treatment of the way things are. Actually, let me put it to you this way. I'm thinking out loud here, so we're totally spitballing. Probably the masculine perspective is more like capitalism. It's more like the idea that in order to improve our condition, we must grow. We have to exploit new lands, new peoples, new resources. We have to get more. Now, there is a time for that. Okay? There's a time to grow. However, in the late stages of capitalism, there's a pretty fair argument to be made that what we need, for example, here in the United States, we don't need to grow. We don't need to export. Like, as a progressive person, I say, why do we need to, conquer the Congo so we can steal their metals? So that we can make tech. Why do we need to do that? Why can't we just buy it from them? What's so wrong with having the people of Congo all of a sudden prosper because we trade with them? Why is that a problem? And so there are more holistic or feminine ways to grow. But we're not talking about the masculine or feminine approach to growth. We're talking about the dichotomy between growth and what I would call churn. There's an argument to be made that what Donald Trump has said he wants to do, I don't know if his actions match it, but what he said he wants to do amounts to churn. It's saying, let's manufacture more in the United States. Let's shore up. Let's be less globalist. There's actually a case to be made for that. I'm not real whippy on his execution for reasons I won't get into. But in principle, the idea isn't bad. And I think it's a valid principle. The idea being, instead of necessarily needing to go outside to get what we need, let's look inward to get what we need. Let's allow the population of instead of thinking outward and downward, which is basically trickle-down economics. In other words, the only way any of this works is if we exploit someone else and then the money goes to the top and then trickles down to everybody else. I say, well, yeah, but we've got 5 decades that prove that in practice, there's a bunch of glitches in that model where it turns out it doesn't really actually work that well, for the simple reason that once it goes to the top, it doesn't really want to come down unless it's absolutely necessary. Okay? The opposite approach would be, no, let's do trickle up. The example I give, and I think this may inform or help your storytelling, but let me just finish the rant and you'll see if you agree. So the example I like to give is if in my neighborhood, there's about 400 homes in my neighborhood, okay? The question is, maybe I've given this example here before, I probably have, but so sorry if I'm repeating myself. The question is this: does the neighborhood benefit more if we go, well, who's the most successful or richest person in the neighborhood? Let's give the $10 million to them, because that will inspire them to build new businesses and hire the people in the neighborhood and give them wages and create jobs. Yeah, that's what'll happen. To which I say, no. If I was the richest guy in the neighborhood, first of all, there's no reason for me to create a new business unless I have a reason. So just giving me an influx of money does not create that. So that point alone destroys the whole argument that reducing taxes on the rich somehow makes it better for everybody else. You know, the argument that all ships are raised by a rising tide. That's true. The problem is the tide isn't rising. The only way the tide rises is if you took the 10 million and distributed it among the 40 or 400 people in the neighborhood, give them all equally that amount, and then see what happens. Because what would happen is that, number one, a lot of that money would be spent, and it would be spent immediately, and it would be spent locally. And that's a good thing. Furthermore, some people who've been maybe in an oppressed state would go, oh man, I've got this influx of money. Now maybe this is my moment to start a business. Maybe now this is my moment to improve my condition. You see? So in point of fact, in practical terms, trickle up actually works infinitely better. The problem that the person on the other side of the aisle is going to argue with me is they're going to say, well, yeah, but if you do it that way, then there's going to be people that will take advantage of the system. They're going to take that share that they've been given and they're just going to waste it, or they're not going to be productive, or they're just going to hoard it or whatever. And worst of all, they're going to take it and ostensibly they don't deserve it. And I would say to them, I'd say, yeah, you're right. There will be some waste. The thing is, let's look at the data. Let's look at what Mandani's trying to do in New York if he becomes mayor. He's saying, let's look at the data. Let's just let the data lead us. What does the data say? 2 things that are very significant to the argument that I just listened to about waste. And the argument is, over time, we know that the number of people that will take advantage of a system and basically be the wasteful ones that are undeserving, it's a kind of a fixed percentage. It's in the sub 10% range, and it's kind of a fix. It's kind of like, because people do actually have ethics, and they do have motivation. The other argument is, and wait a second, are you suggesting that hoarding and waste and selfishness and cheating hasn't been happening from the top side of the spectrum? Are you saying that? That's insane. That's obviously insane. People want to make the argument that we shouldn't be socialist in America. But we are. We already are. It's just that the socialism goes to the top, not the bottom. That's all. But it's total socialism. Can that work sometimes? Is it good sometimes? Absolutely. There's a very important role for subsidies, for example, to play in the United States. And by the way, the subsidies that happened for farmers back in the 70s, and then you look at the arc into now, it was a fairly stabilized system that has actually been completely upended in the current, basically under Trump. where the farmers are really suffering a lot. Okay, so what does this have to do with storytelling? Well, what it has to do with is the fact that there's always two perspectives to a story. There's the idea of looking outward and looking inward. Why would you label them male and female? Well, basically because if you're male, you think of the quest or the problem that you have, if you're the hero in the story, as being something where you need to go outside of yourself and conquer something in order to win and be the hero. Whereas the more feminine view might be, well, no, what I need to do is look inward and realize that everything I need to achieve my heroic goal was always here all along. I just didn't see all the people and resources and opportunities that were right in front of my face. I've been ignoring them because I bought the lie that the only way you can achieve something good and neat and progressive is by looking outward and harming or beating or winning or conquering somebody else. Both actually work. I'm not making a moral judgment about whether that's good or bad. Both can work. It's really what kind of a story do you want to tell, right? Okay, so yes, that spacing of the dialogue. Oh, wait. I'm looking at the comments here. So does that help at all? Chiziapo, I'm assuming you're still here. Masculine stories are about becoming, meaning you have to look inside yourself to do something that you thought you couldn't do, and then you do it, and everybody sees you as the hero, and you beat the bad guy, blah blah blah. Feminine stories about we are saying no, we're thinking wrong, we're looking at it wrong. Don't you guys realize if we all just kind of pulled together and put our heads together and share ideas, and that we could solve this problem? We don't need to go out and beat the bad guy. Probably in the socio-political sphere, the quintessential example of that would be that if literally everybody in the country said, let's just say the billionaires are oppressive or whatever, and blah blah blah, and they all say, well, all on the same day, we're going to basically either strike or boycott. The fact of the matter is that is extremely effective. Because once you hit the enemy in their pocketbook, they tend to respond very, very quickly. We've seen it over and over again. Is it always the right answer? No. But it's an answer, and it's an answer worth considering, right? So that seems more what you might call feminine. So anyway, if anybody has an opinion about that, Chiziape was gone a bit silent. Quest, then, is a feminine story. Galaxy Quest is a feminine story disguised as a masculine story. It could be. I haven't seen Galaxy Quest. It expands my thinking on it, having a deeper retrospective look on the statement. Yeah. I mean, when somebody says something like that that's really, really simple, you want to carefully consider whether it's actually, you want to think about the context in which it's being said and consider whether it's actually applicable to your situation. What I said about timing, the basic truism being, let it breathe. Okay? So for me, that's a very simple statement. What I find is that's one of those rare statements in the context of animation or acting that has very broad application and basically almost always works. The way to think of it for you guys as animators would be this. When in doubt, take whatever you're trying to communicate in your little sequence or scene of animation and make it longer. I hate to say that because then somebody will think that's like a rule that means I always need to make everything happen slowly. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that your natural proclivities as an animator are corrupted by a lie. And the lie that you weren't necessarily told explicitly, but you probably, it's embedded itself in you, is the lie that the magic is in the animation. When in fact, the animation, or the magic is not in the animation at all. I'm sorry, talking too fast. The magic is in the storytelling. And you have to realize that storytelling is much more than animation. It's the drawing. It's the framing. It's, the camera angle. It's the pacing. It's the storytelling and the characters and the characterization that all contribute to the magic. By far, I do say this emphatically. The least important thing is the movement. And the anime industry proves this. Because if you watch an anime and you just watch it through, you'll be stunned at how many there will be money shots. So every few minutes there's going to be a money shot with a lot of animation. But most of the time through most of the show, they're cheating. It's essentially a static shot where maybe the mouth moves or there's a little bit of movement, and then maybe they pan the background or they have some crazy special effects on the screen to sort of distract your eye. But basically, it's a sequence of still frames. The storytelling is actually that. And it's good storytelling. And my point here would be in many cases, if you quit that cheating and actually did full animation, the question you got to ask yourself is, would the storytelling and the engagement be better? I will tell you, I believe probably not. It would probably not only not be better, but it'd probably be worse. And I believe this because if you look at what Disney did in the 70s, the 1960s, and into the 70s, before they got to The Little Mermaid, and all of a sudden the story and the characters were great, what they were doing in the 60s and 70s that almost bankrupted them, by the way, was they had fallen into the trap of thinking that the animation was going to carry the day. So what they had, obviously there's good things about Robin Hood, there's good things about the Sword and the Stone, there's good things about the Aristocats, but basically through that period of time, real broad brush here, they fell into the trap of thinking that you could get away with having a shit story with just okay characters and that the animation was going to carry the day. They got their asses handed to them in the marketplace because of that mistake. The animation was never what it was about. They just thought it was. It was always about the story, always about the characters. And I'm not a massive Jeffrey Katzenberg fan, but the fact is he came in and he added that back into the mix. He said, wait a minute. We need to have amazing characters with amazing stories, and then we'll figure out how to make them move in a way that's compelling. And then, admittedly, the animation was damn good. No question about it. So, anyway, that's enough of the diatribe for today. I got to wrap it up. Hope it helped, and as you guys know, there will be more later.